I'm not telling this because I think I solved anything. I didn't. I'm telling it because I did what I always do when something feels wrong. I looked for the normal explanation. I found it, and I believed it. Then, the sky did exactly what the alert said it would, even though the alert wasn't for my county. I've replayed it enough times that I can't even remember what I was trying to get away from that day. I just remember wanting space, trees, water, a night where nobody needed anything from me. It was a late summer weekday, the kind of weekday where the world feels like it's at work somewhere else. I drove out to a lakeside state park that's usually crowded on weekends, but midweek it can be almost empty. The air was heavy and wet, like the humidity had decided to sit on your shoulders and stay there. I pulled in mid-afternoon and immediately noticed the quiet. Not the nice quiet either. Not the normal no-people quiet, where you still hear birds arguing and squirrels doing squirrel stuff. This was a flatter kind of quiet, a muted soundscape, like everything had turned its volume down. I told myself it was the weather. Humidity can do that. It can swallow distance, soften sound, and make you feel like you're walking through a warm towel. The park was open. The little booth at the entrance was empty, but the gate arm was up, and there was a sign that listed the usual rules. No glass, quiet hours, don't feed wildlife. The lake was visible through the trees, dull green and still. I chose a campsite closer to the water because I knew the deeper you went into the trees, the more your phone becomes a paperweight. Near the shore, I could usually catch a bit of service. I wasn't planning anything dramatic. Just a small tent, a sleeping pad, a cooler, and a cheap folding chair. I wanted to be bored in a place that didn't care about me. The campsite itself looked normal. Fire ring, picnic table, a post with the campsite number on it. The ground was soft with pine needles and damp dirt. I could smell the lake and the warm decay of summer plants, that sweet, sour, algae smell that sticks to the back of your throat if you stand downwind. I set the tent up facing the water because it felt less claustrophobic. The trees were close enough to shade the site, but the lake gave it an opening. My phone had one bar, sometimes two. That was good enough for me. Lauren had laughed when I left, like I was going on some grand expedition. Emma had asked if there were monsters in the woods. I'd told her no, there aren't monsters, there are just animals that want to be left alone. That was my whole vibe. Practical. Skeptical. Don't make a mystery out of everything. I'm still that guy. That's part of why this bothers me. I finished the setup, tent staked, cooler in the shade, chair positioned where I could see the water. I even took a quick walk down to the shoreline to test my service. 2 bars, LTE flickering like it was embarrassed to be there. I looked around and counted other occupied sites. 1, maybe 2, and both were far enough away that I couldn't see people. Just the hint of another tent through the trees. A tarp, a faint smell of someone's earlier campfire. Dusk was still a few hours off, but the sky already looked tired. It wasn't cloudy exactly. It was hazy, like the whole afternoon had been breathed on. Around the time I started thinking about dinner, my phone buzzed. Not a text buzz, not an email. The harsh, ugly emergency alert sound that makes your stomach jump. The screen lit up with that block of official-looking text, and my first thought was Amber Alert. It's usually that, or a severe thunderstorm warning. I read it once and didn't understand it. I read it again and got annoyed. The alert was for a county that wasn't mine. It wasn't even a neighboring county. It was a county name I recognized only because I'd driven through that part of the state once years ago. It was hundreds of miles away. The wording was strange too. Not tornado warning. Not severe thunderstorm. It said there was a localized atmospheric event in progress. Shelter advised. Avoid open areas. Remain indoors if possible. Localized atmospheric event. That's the kind of phrase you'd expect in a research paper, not a phone alert. I snorted and locked my phone, thinking somebody had messed up a geofence. It happens. Technology is held together with tape and prayers. Then the alert hit again. Same county, same wording, same everything. Then a third time, back to back, like it was panicking. 3 alerts in under a minute, all telling me about a county 300 miles away. I stared at the screen long enough that my irritation started to shift into something else. Not fear yet, more like that feeling when you hear your name in a room you weren't supposed to be in. I did the sensible thing. I checked radar. The first weather app showed nothing. Clear skies, no warnings near me. The second app showed the same. The third, a different data source, also showed nothing. No storms building, no lines approaching, no watch boxes. I zoomed out until I could see the entire state. The county named in the alert was quiet too. Nothing special. No big red polygon, no warning banner. It was like the alert had been written by someone who didn't have access to the same sky I did. I stood up and looked around, actually scanning the horizon like I expected to see a wall of clouds. The lake sat there, dull and still. The trees barely moved. The air was hot, but not violently hot, just late summer hot. And yet, something felt different. The humidity got heavier, but it wasn't just moisture. It felt like pressure, like the atmosphere had leaned down closer to the ground. My ears didn't pop. They should have if it was a pressure shift, and that's what made it worse. My body was noticing something it didn't know how to process. I took a slow breath and realized the smell had changed. The lake smell was still there, but underneath it there was something sharp, almost metallic, like wet pennies, like the air before lightning, except there were no clouds. I told myself it was coming rain and my apps were behind. That happens too. Radar isn't magic. Then I noticed the sound. The birds were gone. Not quiet because it's evening. Gone. Like someone hit pause on the whole tree line. I walked closer to the shore, partly to keep service, and partly because water tends to tell you what wind is doing. If there's a breeze, you'll see it. The lake looked wrong. It wasn't choppy. It wasn't calm the normal way. It was glass. A perfect glossy surface with no texture. Even when there's no wind, you usually see tiny flickers from insects, little dimples, small rings that overlap. This was like a sheet. I crouched and watched, expecting to see something break the surface. A fish, a bug, anything. Nothing. Then, about 30 or 40 feet out, a perfect ring appeared. No splash, no drop, just a circle forming from a single point and expanding outward. It was so clean it looked deliberate, like a graphic effect. The ring spread out, hit nothing, and faded. Then another ring formed from the same point. Same size spacing, same speed, same perfect geometry. I pulled my phone up and started recording, because if I didn't, I knew I'd talk myself out of it later. The camera made it worse. On screen it looked even cleaner, like the lake had become a display. I stepped left, trying to change my angle, and the ring stayed centered on that same invisible point. No disturbance, no animal breaking the surface, no branch dropping in, just ripples. My brain kept searching for the simple explanation and kept not finding one. I tried to call Lauren. My phone showed 1 bar, then none, then suddenly full bars like it had remembered how to behave. LTE. Full strength. I hit call. It didn't connect. It didn't ring either. It just sat there like a loading screen, like it was pretending it was doing something. I hung up and tried again. Same thing. I tried calling my voicemail. Same thing. I opened a browser and typed in something simple, just to see if data worked. The page loaded halfway and froze. Full bars. No function. It felt like being handed a steering wheel that wasn't connected to anything. I turned the phone off and back on, like restarting a device could restart the world. While it booted, I glanced back at my campsite and saw something that made me stand up straight. A line of insects. They were arranged on one of my tent stakes, the metal one I'd hammered into the soft dirt. They were on top of it like little beads on a string. Perfect spacing, all facing the same direction. And they were motionless. Not dead, not struggling, just held. I leaned closer, close enough to see their legs and antennae. Nothing moved. I waved my hand, creating a little gust. They didn't react. I tapped the stake with my finger. They didn't shift or wobble. They stayed aligned like they'd been placed there on purpose. I backed away without meaning to, a small, involuntary step. My phone turned back on in my hand and immediately buzzed again. Another emergency alert. Same county, same wording. It felt like something was insisting I pay attention. I made myself do another normal check. Weather radio. Most state parks still have those little metal bulletin boards with local info. Some have an actual NOAA weather radio receiver in the office area, but the park office was closed. Still, I had a small hand crank radio in my car. Habit. I've always kept one. I walked to the car, and the moment I stepped deeper under the trees, my phone dropped to no service again. It was like there was a line on the ground where the world decided you didn't get to communicate anymore. The air under the trees felt worse. Heavier, sticky. But also, still, no breeze, no insect buzz. I opened the car, grabbed the radio, and cranked it up. Static. Then the robotic weather voice snapped into place.
This is NOAA Weather Radio. Severe weather statements and alerts are issued by the National Weather Service.
Normal enough. I waited for it to cycle.
At 6:32 p.m., a localized atmospheric event has been detected. Residents in the following area should take immediate shelter, avoid open water, avoid open areas.
My skin prickled. It didn't name my county either. It named the same far-off county from the phone alert. I stared at the radio like it had betrayed me. It repeated, same phrasing, same unnatural term.
Localized atmospheric event, shelter advised, remain indoors if possible.
I looked up through the trees and noticed the light had shifted. Dusk was coming faster than it should have. The sky had taken on a bruised tint, even though the sun hadn't gone down yet. I cranked the radio again, thinking maybe the signal was crossed. Maybe it was picking up a distant transmitter. But the frequency marker was correct. The station ID at the start was the local one, the one that should have been talking about my region. And it was still reading an alert for somewhere else, with one extra line that hadn't been on my phone.
Avoid open water.
I glanced toward the lake. The trees blocked most of it from here, but I could see a slice of smooth surface through the trunks, a flat, dark strip, like oil. I walked back toward the shore, fast enough that my shoes scuffed. The air near the water felt even more pressurized, like stepping into a room where a machine was running. The ripples were still happening. Same point. Same perfect circles. I held my phone up again and kept filming, partly because I didn't want to lose proof, and partly because the act of recording made me feel like I had a job. Like this was an observation instead of a situation. The seam showed up slowly. At first it was just a faint straight line across the haze. I thought it was a contrail. Except it didn't have the soft edges of a contrail. It was too crisp. too clean. It looked like the sky had been folded and the crease had never fully smoothed out. A seam. That's the only word that fits. It ran from one side of my view to the other, like a boundary, like a cut. I moved my head, changed my angle, and it stayed exactly where it was. It wasn't an illusion for my eyes, it was in the sky. I zoomed in on my phone. The seam didn't blur, it stayed straight, a faint line with a hard edge. My car alarm chirped once behind me. Just a single chirp, like I'd hit lock. I turned and saw the car lights didn't flash. Nothing else happened. It was like the car had cleared its throat. I walked back to the car and hit the lock button. The car beeped normally. So the horn worked. The system worked. It had just decided to chirp by itself once, a moment ago, for no reason. I didn't like the way that stacked with everything else. Across the lake, through the haze, a campsite light turned on. Not a lantern glow that slowly brightens. A hard-on. Like a switch. Then off again. Then on. Then off. A slow pattern with steady timing. Like someone counting. I watched it for a full minute. No person moved near it. No silhouette. No shifting shadows. It was just the light blinking in that slow rhythm. I raised my phone and zoomed. The video flattened the distance, but it didn't reveal a person. It just showed a bright point cutting through the dusk, turning on and off like a signal. My instinct was to call out. I did, just one shout. A simple, "Hey!" My voice sounded wrong in the air. It didn't carry. It didn't echo. It felt like it stopped 2 feet from my mouth, swallowed by the humidity. I tried again, louder. Same effect, like sound was being dampened deliberately. That was when my watch vibrated again. It congratulated me. Steps goal reached. I looked down and watched the number tick upward, while I stood perfectly still. 1, 2, 3. I lifted my wrist closer to my face, like I could intimidate it into behaving. The number kept climbing. I turned the screen off and back on. The count kept climbing. I took a single step forward. The count didn't change. It was counting steps that weren't mine. I walked back to my campsite with my stomach tight, and as I approached, I saw the insect line had changed. It was longer. More insects had joined the row, perfectly spaced, like someone was extending a measurement. Still no movement. I crouched and stared at them until I felt stupid. Then I did something I'm not proud of. I flicked one. It moved. Just barely. Like it was stuck to something and I'd broken part of the adhesion. Its legs twitched once, then it froze again. I flicked another. It didn't move at all. The row looked less like insects and more like markers, like the world had used them as a visual aid for me. I stood up and looked around the site, trying to catch the simplest explanation. Chemicals. Pesticide. Some weird pheromone line. Except they weren't on the ground following a trail. They were on a vertical tent stake, and they were aligned like someone had taken the time to place them. My phone buzzed again. Another emergency alert. Same distant county. Same localized atmospheric event. No mention of seams, no mention of ripples, just that unnatural label. I took a screenshot. I don't know why. Maybe because a screenshot is harder to deny later. A little piece of official reality I could hold on to. Then I took another screenshot when it repeated, just to capture the timestamp. Evidence. That's what my brain called it. Evidence that I wasn't imagining it. I tried to leave right then. Not in a panic, not running, just an orderly, rational decision. Pack up, drive out, go home, laugh about the broken alert later. I started with the simple stuff. Cooler lid shut, chair folded, sleeping pad rolled. That's when I noticed the seam again. It was clearer now. The light had dimmed more and the line across the sky had sharpened. It wasn't just a line either. It was like one side of the seam had a slightly different shade than the other. Like two layers didn't match perfectly. I watched it for a few seconds and felt my throat tighten. It was moving. Not drifting like a cloud. Shifting closer. Like a ceiling lowering. Slowly, smoothly, no wobble. The idea hit me hard, like the sky was coming down. I laughed once, just a reflex, and it sounded wrong. Too small and too contained. I forced myself to keep packing. If I left, it would become somebody else's problem, or it would stop existing the moment I wasn't there to notice it. That's another thing I do. I assume the world behaves around my attention. It's a coping mechanism disguised as logic. The zipper on my tent jammed. It wasn't stuck on fabric. It wasn't caught on a flap. It felt fused, like the teeth had melted together. I yanked harder than I should have, bracing my knee against the tent. Nothing. I pulled the other direction, trying to reverse it. Still nothing. That zipper had worked perfectly 10 minutes earlier. I'd opened and closed it while setting up. Now it might as well have been welded shut. I felt that first real spike of panic then, because this was no longer weird weather. This was the environment actively messing with my ability to leave. The lake ripples continued in the background, perfectly timed, like a metronome for my heartbeat. I grabbed my knife from the cooler pocket and sliced one of the guy lines. The tent sagged, losing tension, and the zipper finally gave a little. Not enough to open, just enough to show it wasn't a normal jam. The fabric around it looked slightly puckered, like it had been heated. I didn't bother saving it. I cut another line and let the whole tent collapse toward me, then shoved my sleeping bag and a couple essentials into the car without folding anything. I left the tent body behind. I left the stakes, except the one with the insect row, because I didn't want to touch it again. My hands were shaking, and I hated that. I hate feeling physically controlled by fear, but I could also feel the air changing, thickening, pressing, like the world wanted me to be slower. I got in the car, started it, and the radio came on automatically.
Localized atmospheric event. Shelter advised. Avoid open water. Remain indoors if possible.
It was the same robotic voice, the same phrasing, but it felt like it was in the car with me now. Not distant, not broadcast, present. I shut the radio off. The seam lowered another fraction. I could see it through the windshield now if I tilted my head back. A straight line cutting across the dim sky, closer than it had been, too low for comfort. I threw the car into reverse, backed out of the sight, and headed toward the park road. The headlights swept across trees and the reflective markers on the road. Everything looked normal until I reached the entrance area. The big park sign was there, but when my headlights hit it, the letters didn't reflect properly. It wasn't like the sign vanished. It just didn't respond. The green background soaked up the light. The white letters stayed dull, like I was shining my headlights at wet cardboard. I slowed down because my brain insisted there was a rational reason. Maybe the sign had been repainted with non-reflective paint. Maybe the humidity was scattering the light. Then the sign seemed to fade. Not physically disappear. More like the concept of sign was losing priority in my vision. Like my headlights couldn't convince it to be there. I blinked hard, and it snapped back for a second, then dulled again. I didn't like that at all. The gate arm at the entrance, the one that had been up earlier, was down now. No booth attendant, no car, just the arm blocking the lane. I stopped in front of it and stared. I could have gotten out and lifted it manually if it wasn't locked. I could have driven around it if I wanted to risk the ditch. Instead, I tried the rational option first. I backed up, pulled forward again, hoping it had a sensor. Nothing. I honked once. The honk sounded wrong too. It was muted, like it was being absorbed by the humid air. I got out. The moment I stepped away from the waterline, my phone dropped to no service again. It didn't matter. Calls weren't connecting anyway. I walked to the gate arm and tried to lift it. It didn't budge. It wasn't locked with a padlock. It just felt heavier than it should have, like it had been filled with concrete. I put both hands on it and strained. Nothing. I stepped back, breathing hard, and looked up. The seam was lower. Close enough now that it felt like it had presence, like a surface, not just a line. The sky on either side looked slightly mismatched, like two different pieces of paper taped together. I got back in the car and did what I didn't want to do. I drove around the gate. The tires slid on damp grass and my car tilted into the shallow ditch, but it climbed out. I didn't care about the undercarriage. I cared about leaving. A minute later, my dashboard clock blinked. Just once, like it had lost power. The engine didn't sputter, the lights didn't dim, only the clock blinked. Then it settled into a time that was wrong by exactly 1 hour. I reached up and changed it back. It immediately flipped forward again, like the car and I were disagreeing about what time it was. The seam lowered more. I could see it through the windshield without tilting my head now. It was like a straight, pale scar across the sky, descending so slowly you could doubt it if you weren't watching. The air inside the car felt thick, not hot, not cold, dense, like the cabin of the car had been filled with invisible gel. I cracked the window. Outside, the air smelled metallic again, stronger now. Wet pennies and something like ozone, but without the freshness. It smelled tired. My phone buzzed. Another alert. I didn't want to look, but I did. Same far-off county? Same phrase? The timestamp on it didn't make sense. It was out of order, like it had arrived earlier than the previous one. I took another screenshot because my hands were moving on autopilot now. Collecting proof like proof would protect me. I tried to use GPS. The map loaded, showed me on the park road. Then the dot jumped. It jumped a mile away, then back. Then it spun like a compass needle in a magnet factory. Full bars. No function. The car's built-in compass, a little icon on the dash, flickered and then disappeared entirely. I laughed again, sharp and ugly, because that's what I do when things stop obeying. I slowed down and pulled into a small gravel turnout, the kind meant for maintenance vehicles. I told myself I needed to stop and think. If I kept driving blind, I'd end up in a ditch or a tree. I turned the engine off. The silence that followed was immediate and wrong. No insects, no distant highway, no rustle of leaves. Just my breathing. I looked out through the windshield and saw the seam lowering toward the treetops. I couldn't judge distance. It wasn't like it was a physical ceiling you could measure, but it felt closer in a way that made my spine tighten. I held my phone up and recorded the sky, trying to capture the seam in the frame. On the screen, it looked even more unnatural. The straightness was too perfect, the edge too clean. Then the lake ripples came back into my head like a punch. Avoid open water. The radio had said that. The alert hadn't. the radio had. I didn't know why that detail mattered, but it did. Like someone was telling me the rules. I started the car again and kept driving. This is the part that's hardest to describe without sounding dramatic. The park road started to feel like it was repeating. Not the actual scenery exactly, more like the spacing of things. The same bend, the same cluster of trees, the same broken branch lying near the shoulder. I passed that branch twice. I'm sure of it because it was shaped like a hook, and it made me think of a question mark. The third time I saw it, I didn't slow down. I pressed the gas harder, like speed could force the road to behave. My headlights started to feel dimmer. Not failing, just less effective. Like the beam wasn't traveling as far. Like the air itself was thicker and eating the light. Ahead, between the trees, I saw a faint glow. For a second, I thought it was the campsite light again, the one blinking across the lake. But this glow was closer, on the road. I approached, heart pounding, and realized it was a small ranger station building, one I hadn't noticed on the way in. A little office with a porch light. The porch light was turning on and off in that same slow pattern. On, off, on. No person visible. Just the light, signaling like it wanted my attention. I pulled over without meaning to, like my body made the choice before my brain could argue. I sat in the car staring at that porch light. The building looked real. Wood siding, a small sign, windows with blinds. But the light didn't cast normal shadows. It was too contained, like it was lighting only itself. I didn't want to get out. I didn't want to walk toward it. Every instinct said stay in the car and keep moving. Still, the rational part of me said a ranger station meant a phone, a landline, a radio, a person who could tell me the gate wasn't supposed to be locked down. The porch light clicked on again, and for the first time, I saw movement in the window. Not a silhouette or a person. The blinds twitched, like something behind them had pressed against them. Then they settled back into place. I swallowed, put the car in park, and got out. The air hit me like a wall. Not wind or heat, but density, like I was stepping into a room where the pressure was slightly too high. The seam was lower, close enough now that it felt like a boundary hovering above the treetops. I walked toward the ranger station, shoes crunching on gravel, and the sound of my footsteps didn't travel. It was like the noise died immediately. I reached the porch. The light turned off. The moment it did, the building looked flatter, less dimensional. The light turned on again, and the building looked normal. That made my skin crawl. I knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again, harder. The door felt cold under my knuckles, cold enough to be wrong in that humid heat. I tried the handle. It turned. The door opened. Inside was dark. Not lights off dark. The darkness had weight to it, like it was thick in the room. The porch light behind me spilled a narrow strip across the floor, but the rest of the interior didn't take it the way it should have. The light didn't bounce or spread, it just stopped, like it hit an invisible wall. I didn't step inside. I stayed at the threshold and called out, and my voice came out small and wrong again, swallowed almost immediately by the air. Nobody answered. I leaned forward just enough to scan the room without crossing in, looking for something normal. A desk, a phone, a sign-in sheet, anything. I could barely make out the outline of a counter and a bulletin board in the gloom, and something low that might have been a chair. Then the porch light clicked off. The strip of light vanished, and the interior collapsed into a solid block of black. It didn't feel like a room anymore. It felt like a flat surface pretending to be depth. The porch light clicked on again, and the room returned. My throat tightened so hard it hurt, because that wasn't a power flicker. That was the building changing depending on whether it was being lit. I backed away, keeping my eyes on the doorway the whole time. Behind me, my car alarm chirped once, that same single polite beep, like it was reminding me it existed. I didn't look away from the doorway until I was back in my car. I got in, locked the doors, and drove. The road finally let me out, and I don't know how else to phrase it. I hit the county road like I'd broken through a membrane, and the change was immediate. The air felt lighter, sound rushed back in, and I could hear crickets and distant traffic again, the normal nighttime noise of things going on without me. The headlights suddenly seemed brighter too, like they were finally allowed to travel as far as they were meant to. I checked the rearview mirror and watched the tree line of the park recede into darkness. Above it, the seam was still there, faint and straight, but it wasn't lowering anymore. It just sat in the sky like a pale scar. I drove for nearly 20 minutes before my hands stopped shaking enough for me to notice they had been shaking at all. My phone, which had been useless, suddenly came back to life, and notifications poured in all at once like it had been holding its breath. I called Lauren. The call connected immediately.
Hey, are you okay? You didn't answer any of my texts.
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm heading home early.
Early? How early? You just got there today.
I know. Something about the park felt off, and I didn't feel like staying the night.
Off how?
I don't want to try explaining it over the phone. I'll tell you when I get home.
You're not hurt, right?
No, I'm fine. I promise.
Okay. Just get home safe.
I will. I'm on my way. I said it like it was certain, even though my hands were still unsteady on the wheel. When I got home, I dumped everything onto the kitchen table like I'd come back from some kind of quiet war with the weather. Lauren took one look at my face and didn't ask how the trip was. I sat down, and I unlocked my phone instead of trying to explain it out loud. I showed her the screenshots first, the emergency alert with the wrong county listed, the repeated timestamps, and the same strange wording every time.
That's not even close to where you were.
I know.
Did you get any other warnings like this before?
No. That's what made it stand out. Then I played the video I'd taken of the lake. The water stayed perfectly smooth except for the concentric ripples forming again and again from a single point, with nothing touching the surface. She watched it without speaking, once all the way through, and then again, leaning closer to the screen.
Are you sure nothing fell in?
I watched it happen in real time. Nothing broke the surface.
It looks like something is tapping the water from underneath, like it's testing it without pushing through.
I didn't like that description because it added a direction. And underneath was not a direction I wanted to think about. Later that night, after Emma was asleep, I checked the official radar again. It was still blank. There were no warnings, no records, and nothing listed for my county at all. The only proof that anything had happened lived on my phone, in screenshots that insisted the alert belonged to a county hundreds of miles away. I told myself that was the end of it. I told myself it had been a technical glitch layered on top of a strange, calm evening, layered on top of a brain that had been tired. I told myself that because I needed the world to stay normal enough to raise a kid in it. Weeks passed, and the whole thing settled into a version I could carry around without dropping it. When I thought about it, I caught myself rehearsing how I'd tell it if it ever came up, already trimming it down, already deciding which parts sounded too dramatic to say out loud. I left the seam out entirely. I treated the ranger station like it had been my nerves playing tricks on me. I filed the insects under things I would never say to another adult without expecting a look. But the screenshots stayed on my phone. Every so often I'd scroll past them, and my stomach would tighten like my body remembered the pressure even when my mind tried to sand it down into something normal. Then, one evening my phone buzzed, and that harsh emergency alert sound hit the cabin like a slap. My heart jumped so hard, I felt it climb into my throat. I grabbed the phone and braced for the same wrong county all over again. The wording was identical. It still called it a localized atmospheric event. It still told me to take shelter and avoid open areas. The difference was the location line. It didn't list a county this time. It listed my home address out here in the woods, the street number, the road name, the town, and the zip code, like it wasn't warning a region at all. It felt like it was warning me. I stared at it until my eyes went dry, and then I took a screenshot because I knew, in that moment, that whatever had happened at the lake hadn't finished with me. Thanks for sticking around till the end. Like the video, subscribe for more, and share it if you know someone who'd be into this kind of content. There's another video waiting for you on screen now. I think you'll like that one too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.